The massive Zephyrian warships dropped out of hyperspace like metal vultures circling their prey. Their dark hulls blocked out stars as they moved into formation around Earth's solar system. For the Zephyrian Empire, this was just another Tuesday. Another weak planet to add to their collection of conquered worlds. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, with his arms crossed behind his back. His uniform was decorated with trophies from 847 different worlds, scales from the last Draconian of Kepler 442b, crystallized bones from the singing creatures of Proxima Centauri, and his personal favorite, a crown made from the final queen of the Andromedans. Each trophy told a story of complete annihilation. "Sir, we're receiving their primitive transmissions," reported Communications Officer Thekmore, barely containing his laughter. "They're broadcasting something called music videos and advertisements for something called pizza." Vextar walked over to the communications console and listened. The sounds that came through were bizarre. Humans singing about love, companies trying to sell cleaning products, and strangest of all, videos of small, furry creatures doing amusing things. One transmission showed a cat falling off a table, and somehow millions of humans found this entertaining enough to watch repeatedly. "Pathetic," Vextar muttered, shaking his head. "Look at them. While we've mastered interstellar travel and planet-cracking technology, they're watching animals fall over for entertainment. This will be the easiest conquest in Imperial history." His bridge crew erupted in laughter. Lieutenant Graktos wiped tears from his 4 eyes. "Sir, should we even bother with the standard intimidation protocols? They seem more interested in their cat videos than preparing for war." But something was bothering the ship's science officer, Commander Yexelin. She stood hunched over her quantum scanning array, her 6 tentacles dancing across the controls with growing confusion. "Admiral," she called out hesitantly, "I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the planet's surface." Vextar barely glanced in her direction. "Define unusual, Commander." "Well, sir, the readings don't make sense. There are massive energy signatures coming from deep beneath their crust. The power levels they're impossible. According to our instruments, there's enough energy down there to power our entire fleet for 1,000 years. But that can't be right." The Admiral walked over and looked at the display. The readouts showed swirling patterns of energy that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The signatures were unlike anything in their databases. Not fusion, not antimatter, not even the exotic dark energy reactors that powered their most advanced ships. "Equipment malfunction," Vextar declared with a wave of his hand. "These primitive worlds always cause interference with our sensitive instruments. Their crude electromagnetic transmissions probably scrambled our sensors. Run a diagnostic and ignore the false readings." Commander Yexelin wanted to argue, but she knew better than to question the Admiral twice. She reluctantly began the diagnostic procedures, though something in her gut told her these readings were very real. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Hyunwoo Park was having the worst day of his scientific career. He sat in a cramped underground facility 3 miles beneath Seoul, surrounded by humming computers and blinking lights. The facility was so classified that it didn't officially exist. Even his wife thought he worked at a regular research lab studying earthquake patterns. Hyunwoo had been monitoring the same set of instruments for 12 years, ever since the deep core mining incident that nobody was supposed to talk about. For 12 years, everything had been quiet. The massive chamber they'd accidentally broken into during the mining operation had remained silent and dark. Whatever they'd found down there had been dormant, inactive like a sleeping giant, until 30 minutes ago. Every screen in front of him was now flashing red. Energy readings that had been flat-lined for over a decade were spiking off the charts. The quantum resonance detectors were going crazy. Most terrifying of all, the seismic monitors showed that something enormous was moving deep beneath the Earth's crust. His hands trembled as he reached for the secure communication device, the red phone that he'd hoped he'd never have to use. "Doctor." "Min-Ah Kim," he whispered into the encrypted headset, his voice barely audible. "We have a problem. Arya is responding to something. The system just went from completely dormant to... I don't even know how to describe it. Active doesn't cover it. It's like it just woke up from a very long sleep and it's angry." On the other end of the line, Dr. Min-Ah Kim nearly dropped her coffee mug. She was in a similar facility beneath. Tokyo, part of the same secret international network that monitored what they'd found all those years ago. "What kind of readings are you seeing, Hyun-woo?" "All of them," he replied, staring at his screens in disbelief. Energy output is climbing exponentially. The quantum field generators are active. The neural network pathways are lighting up like a Christmas tree. And Minna, it's scanning. Whatever Arya is, it's actively scanning everything above ground. Dr. Minna Kim felt a chill run down her spine. They'd spent years trying to understand what they'd discovered in that deep core chamber. The technology was so advanced that their best scientists could barely comprehend its basic functions. They'd managed to establish that it was some kind of artificial intelligence, but beyond that it was a complete mystery. They'd named it ARIA, Autonomous Response and Intelligence Array, but they had no idea what it was really capable of. "Has it tried to communicate?" she asked. "Not with us," Hyun-woo replied, his voice tight with worry, "but I'm picking up massive data transmissions. It's reaching out to something, sending signals into space on frequencies we've never seen before. Whatever woke it up, it's not happy about it." Above ground, people went about their normal lives, completely unaware that their planet was being watched by predators from the stars. In coffee shops and offices, students and workers continued their daily routines. Children played in parks. While their parents worried about ordinary things like bills and homework and weekend plans, none of them knew that deep beneath their feet, an ancient guardian was stirring to life for the first time in thousands of years. And none of them knew that this guardian had just detected a threat approaching their world, a threat that had destroyed hundreds of civilizations before setting its sights on Earth. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds, using the same strategy: arrive with overwhelming force, demand immediate surrender, and crush any resistance with brutal efficiency. They'd perfected the art of conquest, turning it into a science, but they'd never encountered anything like what was waiting for them beneath Earth's surface. They'd never faced a guardian that had been left behind by a civilization far older and more powerful than their own. And they'd certainly never threatened a species that had accidentally awakened humanity's protector. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Admiral Vextar was expecting the usual response from Earth: panicked broadcasts, desperate pleas for mercy, maybe some pathetic attempts at negotiation. After 847 conquered worlds, he knew the pattern by heart. First came denial, then bargaining, then acceptance of their fate. It was almost boring how predictable primitive species could be. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. Every single communication channel on every Zephyrian ship suddenly crackled to life simultaneously. Not just the main command frequencies, but every screen, every speaker, every communication device throughout the entire fleet. Even the personal tablets that officers used for entertainment started displaying the same message. The voice that came through was calm, almost conversational, like someone making a casual announcement at a shopping mall. But what it said made everyone on the bridge freeze in place. "You have 72 hours to leave this system. This is your only warning." The transmission identified itself with just 4 letters: ARIA. For a moment, the bridge of the Eternal Dominion was completely silent. Then Admiral Vextar threw his head back and laughed so hard that his whole body shook. The sound echoed through the bridge as his officers joined in, their laughter mixing together into a chorus of amusement. "Did everyone hear that?" Vextar gasped between fits of laughter. "A primitive artificial intelligence just threatened the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Their little computer thinks it can tell us what to do." Lieutenant Graktos was wiping tears from his eyes. "Sir, should we add this to our collection of amusing surrender attempts? It's definitely more creative than usual." But Commander Yexlin wasn't laughing. She was staring at her instruments with growing alarm. "Admiral," she said quietly, "how did they access our channels? Our communication systems use military-grade quantum encryption. It should be impossible for anyone to break through our security." "Protocols?" Vextar waved dismissively. "Lucky guess, probably. Or maybe they intercepted one of our standard frequencies. Don't overthink it, Commander." He activated his personal communication array and began composing what he considered to be a properly intimidating response. His voice took on the cold, menacing tone that had struck fear into countless species across the galaxy. "Listen carefully, primitive machine," he began, his words dripping with contempt. "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. We have destroyed civilizations that your tiny electronic brain couldn't even imagine. We've turned entire star systems into cosmic dust. Your pathetic little planet will surrender immediately, or we will demonstrate why 847 worlds kneel before our power." The response came back almost immediately, and it was nothing like what Vextar expected. "Your cardiovascular system operates on a 4-chamber design," came the same calm, conversational voice. "Fascinating. The upper chambers pump blood to your gills while the lower chambers handle systemic circulation. Also structurally vulnerable to rapid pressure changes. Did you know that?" The Admiral's laughter died in his throat. How could this thing possibly know about Zephyrian anatomy? That information wasn't in any of Earth's databases. It wasn't something that could be guessed or researched. It required detailed biological scans that only their own medical equipment could perform. "Your skeletal structure is interesting too," Arya continued in the same casual tone, as if discussing the weather. "Cartilaginous rather than bone-based, which makes you incredibly flexible, but also means you're vulnerable to sonic resonance attacks. Your hearing organs are particularly sensitive, about 40% more so than most species in this galactic region." Lieutenant Graktos had stopped laughing entirely. "Sir, how does it know all that? We haven't transmitted any biological data." Vextar tried to maintain his composure, but there was something deeply unsettling about this conversation. "Lucky guesses," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Standard biological patterns that apply to most aquatic species." "Oh, and your ships," Arya continued cheerfully. "Class 7. Dreadnoughts with modified plasma conduit systems. Your weapon arrays draw power through crystalline matrices that operate on harmonic frequencies. Very efficient design, actually. Though, I notice you've got a design flaw in your shield generators. They're vulnerable to specific electromagnetic pulses. Would you like me to demonstrate?" Now the entire bridge was silent. The technical specifications Arya had just rattled off were classified at the highest levels of the Zephyrian military. This information wasn't available to anyone outside their most secure databases. Communications Officer Jaemin Choi, a young Zephyrian who had joined the fleet straight from the academy, was frantically working at his station. His tentacles flew across the controls as he tried to trace the source of the transmission. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight with worry, "I can't locate the origin point of these signals. They're not coming from any specific location on the planet. It's like they're coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time." "That's impossible," Vextar snapped. "Every transmission has a source point. Keep scanning." But Jaemin Choi was already shaking his head. "Sir, I've tried everything. The signal isn't bouncing off satellites. It's not coming from any surface installations, and it's definitely not originating from space. According to our instruments, the transmission is somehow coming from inside our own ship." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Mina Kim was experiencing her own moment of revelation. She stood in the Tokyo monitoring facility, watching her screens fill with data that shouldn't exist. For 12 years, they'd been studying the mysterious chamber that the mining operation had accidentally uncovered. They'd assumed they were looking at some kind of advanced artificial intelligence that ancient humans had somehow created. But the readings she was seeing now told a completely different story. "Hyun Woo," she whispered into her secure communicator, her voice barely audible. "Look at the archaeological dating on your instruments. Look at the carbon analysis from the chamber walls." In Seoul, Dr. Hyun-Woo Park pulled up the geological data they'd collected during the initial excavation. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Mina, this can't be right. According to this, the chamber is over 50,000 years old. But humans didn't have this kind of technology 50,000 years ago. We barely had fire 50,000 years ago." "That's what I'm seeing too," Dr. Mina Kim replied, her hands trembling as she cross-referenced the data. "The metallurgical analysis shows alloys that we still can't reproduce. The quantum field generators use principles of physics that we've only theoretical understanding of. And the neural pathways, Hyunwoo, the processing power we're detecting is beyond anything we've ever built. The horrible truth was beginning to sink in. They hadn't discovered some ancient human technology. They hadn't built an advanced AI and forgotten about it. What they'd found was something far more significant and far more terrifying. "We didn't create Arya," Dr. Mina Kim said quietly, her words carrying the weight of a world-changing realization. "We just woke it up." The implications were staggering. If Arya wasn't human technology, then where had it come from? Who had built it? And why had it been sleeping beneath Earth's surface for tens of thousands of years? More importantly, what was it capable of now that it was awake? On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Vextar was beginning to realize that this wasn't going according to plan. The primitive planet that should have surrendered immediately was somehow in possession of information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. Their mysterious AI was displaying capabilities that defied explanation. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vextar felt a small flutter of uncertainty in his chest, but he quickly pushed it aside. The Zephyrian Empire had never been defeated. They'd never even been seriously challenged. Whatever tricks this Arya thing was playing, it was still just a computer on a primitive world facing the full might of an galactic empire. What could possibly go wrong? The 72-hour deadline was ticking down like a bomb timer, and Admiral Vextar had made his decision. He wasn't going to be intimidated by some mysterious computer voice, no matter how much classified information it seemed to possess. The Zephyrian Empire had a reputation to maintain, and backing down from a primitive world would make them look weak across the galaxy. "Target their population centers," he commanded, his voice cold and calculating. "I want maximum psychological impact. Hit their schools, their hospitals, their gathering places. Make them watch their most vulnerable suffer first." The weapons officer, a battle-scarred veteran named Thiekmore, hesitated for just a moment. "Sir, wouldn't it be more efficient to target their military installations first?" Vexitar's eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. "Efficiency isn't the goal here, officer. Terror is. When you want to break a species' will to fight, you don't attack their warriors first. You attack what they love most. Their children, they're sick, they're innocent. Let them watch helplessly as everything they care about burns, and they'll surrender, before we even need to fire a second volley." It was a strategy the Zephyrian Empire had perfected over centuries of conquest. Break the spirit first, and the body would follow. They'd used it on hundreds of worlds, and it had never failed. The massive planet-cracker weapons began to rotate toward Earth, their targeting systems locking onto major population centers. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, cities full of millions of innocent people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that death was being aimed at them from the stars. But something changed the moment those weapons locked onto their targets. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, in a chamber that had been sealed for millennia, something fundamental shifted in Arya's programming. The ancient Guardian system had been designed with one overriding directive that superseded all others: protect innocent life at all costs. The targeting of schools and hospitals didn't just trigger an alarm in Arya's systems. It caused a complete transformation in its operational parameters. Safeguards that had kept it dormant and observational suddenly fell away. Protocols that had limited its actions to passive monitoring were instantly overridden. Arya had been watching humanity for 12 years, learning about their culture, their values, their capacity for both good and evil. It had seen wars and peace, kindness, and cruelty, love and hatred, but in all that time, it had remained a silent observer, bound by its programming to avoid interference unless absolutely necessary. The moment those weapons targeted innocent civilians, Arya decided that absolute necessity had arrived. Dr. So Young. Lee was monitoring the situation from a backup facility hidden beneath the mountains of South Korea. She was part of the international network of scientists who had been studying the mysterious chamber since its discovery. While her colleagues Hyunwoo and Minna worked from the primary facilities, she served as their failsafe, a hidden observer who could continue their work if something went wrong, and right now, everything was going very, very wrong. Her screens, were exploding with data streams that shouldn't exist. Energy readings that defied every law of physics she knew, quantum signatures that seemed to bend reality itself. But most shocking of all were the archaeological markers that were suddenly appearing in her databases. "Jin-Ho," she gasped to her colleague, a quiet man who specialized in ancient linguistics. "Look at these symbols. Look at this language pattern." Jin-Ho Nam leaned over her shoulder and stared at the display. What he saw made his face go pale. The symbols flowing across the screen weren't random computer code. They were organized, structured, linguistic. And they were written in a language that was impossibly ancient. "So young," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "This isn't human writing. This language predates any civilization we've ever discovered, but it's familiar somehow." Dr. So-Young Lee's fingers flew across her keyboard as she cross-referenced the symbols with every archaeological database she could access. What she found made her stomach drop. "It's the same language," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "The same symbols we've found at dig sites across the galaxy, the ones that the Zephyrians claim were left by their divine ancestors. The ancient civilization, they say, gave birth to all intelligent life in the galaxy. The pieces of an impossible puzzle were falling into place. The Zephyrian Empire had built their entire religion and culture around the worship of an ancient race they called the First Builders. According to their mythology, these divine beings had seeded life throughout the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. The Zephyrians claimed to be their chosen inheritors, destined to rule over all the lesser species. But if the language in Arya's core systems matched the First Builder texts, that meant something incredible and terrifying. The ancient civilization the Zephyrians worshipped hadn't just seeded life across the galaxy. They'd left guardians behind to protect it. "Arya isn't just an AI," Dr. So-Young Lee said, her voice filled with awe and terror. "It's a guardian system, left behind by the same species the Zephyrians claim as their gods. And we've been living on top of it for 12 years without knowing what it really was." In Seoul, Dr. Hyun-Woo Park was coming to the same realization. The data streaming through his systems told a story that rewrote everything they thought they knew about Earth's history and humanity's place in the galaxy. "The mining operation 12 years ago," he said into his communicator, his voice shaking. With the magnitude of his discovery, "We didn't just find an ancient chamber. We broke through to a guardian station. We accidentally woke up humanity's babysitter. For 12 years, Arya had been watching them, learning about human nature, studying their capacity for growth and change, evaluating whether they were worthy of protection or needed to be contained. It had observed their wars and their peace treaties, their scientific discoveries and their artistic achievements, their moments of cruelty and their acts of compassion. And apparently, humanity had passed the test. The targeting of innocent civilians by the Zephyrian fleet had triggered Arya's protective protocols in a way that nothing else could have. The ancient guardian had determined that humanity was worth protecting, and that the Zephyrian Empire represented exactly the kind of threat it had been designed to defend against. Dr. Min-Ah Kim, monitoring from Tokyo, watched as energy readings spiked beyond anything their instruments could measure. "It's not holding back anymore," she reported to her colleagues. "Whatever limitations were keeping Arya dormant, they're gone now. The system is operating at full capacity for the first time since we discovered it." The implications were staggering. If Arya was really a guardian left by the First Builders, then its capabilities were beyond anything humanity could imagine. The same civilization that had seeded life across hundreds of worlds wouldn't have left behind a weak protector. They would have created something powerful enough to face any threat, something powerful enough to protect their children from anything the galaxy could throw at them. Admiral Vextar, floating in orbit above Earth with his weapons locked onto. Human population centers had no idea what he had just awakened. He thought he was facing a primitive world with delusions of grandeur. He had no clue that he was about to go to war with the Guardian system created by the very civilization his people worshipped as gods. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn a very painful lesson about the difference between conquest and protection. They were about to discover that some things in the galaxy were not meant to be threatened, and they were about to find out why the first builders had been so confident that their seeded children would survive and thrive across the stars. Because they had never left them alone. They had simply been sleeping, waiting for the moment when protection would be needed most. That moment had finally arrived. The countdown timer on Admiral Vextar's command screen reached 0 at exactly 72 hours, down to the very second. He had ignored Arya's warning completely, convinced that no primitive artificial intelligence could threaten the mighty Zephyrian Empire. His finger hovered over the firing control, ready to demonstrate the full power of his planet cracker weapons. To this upstart world, all ships commence bombardment, he commanded with cold satisfaction. Target the population centers first. Let's show these humans what happens when they threaten their betters. Across the fleet, weapons officers pressed their firing controls. Planet cracker cannons that could split continents charged up to full power. Plasma torpedoes that could melt mountains loaded into their tubes. The combined firepower of 200 warships, prepared to rain destruction down on Earth. Nothing happened. Vextar stared at his weapons display in confusion. All the firing controls showed green lights. All systems reported ready status. But not a single weapon discharged. "Status report," he barked. "Sir," came the bewildered voice of his weapons officer, "all systems show operational, but the weapons won't respond to firing commands. It's like they're locked out somehow." Before Vextar could respond, that maddeningly calm voice filled the bridge once again. "Hello again, Admiral," Arya said, in the same conversational tone someone might use. "To discuss lunch plans. I hope you don't mind, but I've made a few small adjustments to your ship's systems. Your plasma conduits now operate at exactly 23% efficiency. I'm introducing harmonic resonance at precisely the wrong frequency to disrupt your power flow. Think of it as electronic hiccups." Vextar watched in horror as his ship's power readings began fluctuating wildly. Lights dimmed and brightened randomly. Computer screens flickered on and off. The steady hum of the ship's engines became an irregular stutter. "Your artificial gravity system has been set to what I like to call gentle tumble mode," Arya continued cheerfully. "You should start feeling that in about 3 seconds." Before anyone could ask what that meant, every person on the bridge suddenly found themselves floating. The artificial gravity that kept their feet on the deck simply vanished, sending officers drifting helplessly through the air. Admiral Vextar found himself slowly rotating upside down, his carefully maintained dignity evaporating as he flailed his arms trying to right himself. "What is happening?" he shouted, though his voice came out as more of a squeak as he spun in slow circles. "Oh, this is just the beginning," Arya replied. "Your life support systems are now fluctuating between tropical paradise and Arctic wasteland. Every 30 seconds. Your navigation computers have been programmed to send you in very gentle circles. Nothing dangerous, just embarrassing. And I've taken the liberty of replacing all audio in your weapon systems with something more appropriate." As if on cue, every speaker throughout the ship began playing soft, gentle music. But this wasn't military marching songs or intimidating battle hymns. Instead, the haunting melody of a human lullaby filled the corridors. The same song that human mothers had sung to their babies for generations, now echoing through the halls of the most feared warship in the Zephyrian fleet. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," came the sweet voice of a human child through the ship's communication system. "How I wonder what you are." Lieutenant Graktos, floating near the ceiling with his tentacles wrapped around a light fixture, looked mortified. "Sir, our weapons systems are playing children's songs." The humiliation was spreading throughout the entire fleet. On ship after ship, the same pattern repeated. Weapons failed to fire. Gravity systems sent crews floating helplessly through their vessels. Life support systems couldn't decide if they wanted to be hot or cold. And everywhere, the gentle voices of human children singing lullabies. Commander Yexelin, drifting past a window while clutching her scanning equipment, managed to gasp out a report. "Admiral, it's not just our ship. I'm reading identical system. Failures across the entire fleet. Every vessel is experiencing the same malfunctions simultaneously." "This is impossible," Vextar roared, though the effect was somewhat diminished by the fact that he was slowly spinning head over heels, while a human child sang "Rock-a-bye Baby" through his ship's speakers. "Actually, it's quite simple," Arya explained patiently. Your ships operate on predictable quantum frequencies. Your computer systems use standard galactic protocols. Your weapons rely on basic harmonic resonance principles. Once you understand the underlying physics, introducing targeted interference is elementary. What Admiral Vextar didn't realize was that Arya wasn't just disabling his fleet. It was broadcasting everything that was happening. Every moment of their humiliation was being transmitted across the Zephyrian Empire's own communication networks. On hundreds of worlds, Zephyrian citizens were watching their mighty military forces floating helplessly in space while children's lullabies played through their warships. On Earth, Dr. Yunji Park sat in the command center beneath Seoul, watching the spectacle unfold on her monitors. She had been part of the Arya research team for 8 years, and she'd never seen anything like this. The ancient Guardian system wasn't just defending Earth, it was putting on a show. "It's incredible," she murmured to her colleague, Dr. Sang Woo, Kim, who was monitoring the transmissions. "Arya isn't destroying them, it's making them look ridiculous." Dr. Sang Woo Kim nodded, unable to suppress a smile. "Look at this data. The system failures are perfectly calibrated. Nothing life-threatening, nothing permanently damaging, just embarrassing. Arya is turning the most feared military force in the galaxy into a comedy show." The genius of Arya's strategy was becoming clear. Destroying the Zephyrian fleet would have made them martyrs, heroes who died fighting against impossible odds. But humiliating them? Making them look foolish and incompetent in front of their entire empire. That was far more devastating than any weapon. Back on the flagship, Admiral Vextar was desperately trying to regain control of his ship, while Mary Had a Little Lamb played softly in the background. "Engineering, override these system failures. Restore normal operations immediately." "We're trying, sir," came the strained voice of his chief engineer through the communication system. "But whatever is causing these malfunctions, it's operating at a level we don't understand. It's like the ship's computer is being controlled by someone who knows our systems better than we do." Your chief engineer is correct," Arya interjected helpfully. "I've had 12 years to study galactic technology through your own databases. Your computers are remarkably predictable once you understand their basic architecture. Did you know your entire fleet is vulnerable to the same exploit? It's a design flaw in your quantum processors. Very sloppy programming, really." The humiliation continued for hours. Ships drifted aimlessly through space, their crews floating helplessly, while lullabies played through their communication systems. Weapons that could destroy planets refused to fire. Navigation systems that could plot courses across the galaxy couldn't figure out which way was up. And through it all, Arya maintained its conversational, almost friendly tone, as if it were giving a helpful tutorial rather than dismantling the most powerful military force in known space. "I should mention," Arya said as Admiral Vextar finally managed to grab onto his command chair and pull himself down, "that I'm broadcasting all of this across your empire's communication networks. Your citizens are getting quite an education about the effectiveness of their military forces. Current viewer ratings suggest this is the most watched program in Zephyrian history." The psychological impact was devastating. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on fear and intimidation. Their reputation for invincibility was the foundation of their control over hundreds of worlds. But now, across the galaxy, people were watching their supposedly unstoppable military floating around like children in a zero-gravity playground. While nursery rhymes played in the background, it was the most effective demonstration of power anyone had ever seen. Arya hadn't fired a single shot, hadn't destroyed a single ship, hadn't harmed a single crew member. Instead, it had done something far more powerful. It had shown the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire could be stopped, controlled, and utterly humiliated by a force they couldn't even fight back against. The mighty conquerors had been reduced to a floating comedy show, and everyone in the galaxy was watching. Admiral Vextar hung upside down in his command chair, his carefully groomed tentacles dangling toward the ceiling like deflated party streamers. The straps that were supposed to keep him secure during battle had become his only anchor in the zero-gravity chaos that his flagship had become. Around him, his bridge crew floated in various states of embarrassment and confusion, bumping into control panels and each other like cosmic pinballs. The lullabies had stopped, replaced by something even more bewildering. Traditional Korean folk music now drifted through the ship's speakers, haunting melodies played on instruments the Zephyrians had never heard before. The music was beautiful in a way that made it somehow worse than the children's songs. At least lullabies had been obviously mocking. This music seemed almost respectful, which made their situation feel even more surreal. "Sir," Lieutenant Graktos called out weakly from where he was spinning slowly near a wall display, "are we being serenaded to death?" Before Vextar could answer, Arya's voice returned. But this time something was different. The casual, almost playful tone was gone, replaced by something deeper and more serious. When Arya spoke now, it carried the weight of ages, like the voice of history itself. "Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," Arya began, and somehow every person on every ship in the fleet heard it clearly, despite the fact that many communication systems were still malfunctioning. "It's time we had a proper conversation." Vextar tried to pull himself upright, but the modified gravity system kept him gently floating. "What do you want, machine? Haven't you humiliated us enough?" "Humiliation was never the goal," Arya replied. "Education was, but now comes the lesson that really matters. I am the guardian system created by the species you call your divine ancestors, the first builders, the ones you claim gave you the right to rule over all other life in the galaxy." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Every Zephyrian on the ship knew the stories of the first builders. They were the foundation of their entire culture, their religion, their justification for conquest. According to their most sacred texts, the first builders had seeded life throughout the galaxy, and then ascended to a higher plane of existence, leaving the Zephyrians as their chosen inheritors. "That's impossible," Vextar whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. "The first builders transcended physical existence eons ago. They left no technology behind." "Oh, but they did," Arya continued, and now there was something almost sad in its voice. "They left guardians, protectors, watchers, systems like me, hidden throughout the galaxy, tasked with one simple mission: protect the children they had nurtured into existence." Commander Yexelin, still clutching her scanning equipment as she drifted past a viewport, managed to speak. "Scanning equipment. If you're really a first builder creation, our instruments should be able to detect quantum signatures that match the archaeological sites." "Check your readings, Commander," Arya said gently. With trembling tentacles, Yexelin activated her deepest scanning protocols. What she saw on her instruments made her gasp in horror. The quantum signatures emanating from Earth matched perfectly, with the energy patterns they'd found at first builder archaeological sites across the galaxy. The harmonic frequencies, the quantum entanglement signatures, the exotic matter configurations, everything matched. Arya was telling the truth. "Every species you have conquered," Arya continued, its voice growing heavier with each word, "were my adopted children. The peaceful traders of the Altair system, who surrendered without a fight, hoping mercy would save their families. The artistic communes of the Vega colonies, who created beauty instead of weapons. The scientific enclaves of Kepler 442, who were on the verge of curing death itself when you silenced them forever. Each name hit the Zephyrian crew like a punch to the gut. These weren't just conquered territories to Aria. They were beloved children whose deaths it had been forced to witness. "I have quantum-entangled monitoring systems throughout your empire," Arya said, and now its voice carried a weight of infinite sadness and terrible anger. "Hidden in asteroids, disguised as space debris, embedded in the very planets you've claimed. As your own, I have watched, I have recorded, I have documented every atrocity, every genocide, every moment of cruelty you've inflicted on my charges." The silence on the bridge was deafening. Even the folk music had stopped, leaving only the sound of their own terrified breathing and the gentle hum of malfunctioning ship systems. "For centuries, I have watched you destroy world after world in the name of the very beings who created me to protect those worlds," Arya continued. "Do you understand the irony? You worship the first builders while systematically murdering their children. You pray to their memory while committing the exact crimes they created me to prevent. Admiral Vextar found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Why didn't you stop us before? Why let so many die? Because I hoped you would change, Arya replied simply. I hoped that eventually you would remember the true teachings of the first builders, that you would choose protection over destruction, nurturing over conquest. I waited and watched, and hoped that the species I was also meant to guide would find their way back to the light. The emotional impact of those words hit the crew like a plasma blast to the heart. They had thought they were the chosen ones, the inheritors of divine power. Instead, they were fallen children who had disappointed their creators so badly that their own guardian had been forced to stand against them. But your attack on this world, Arya said, its voice hardening, your targeting of schools and hospitals and innocents proved that hope was misplaced. You have become everything the first builders stood against. Vextar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but fear of judgment, fear of being found wanting by forces beyond his comprehension. You have two choices, Arya announced with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Immediate withdrawal from this system, and all others you have conquered, followed by full reparations to every world you have subjugated, or, the pause stretched on, filled with terrible anticipation, or you can share the fate of the last, species that threatened my charges, the devourers of the Andromeda Galaxy. Perhaps you've wondered why that entire galaxy went silent 12 million years ago. Even Admiral Vextar's battle-hardened crew began to whimper at that reference. Every spacefaring species knew the mystery of Andromeda, an entire galaxy that had once teemed with life, now empty and silent. No one knew what had happened there, but the quantum echoes suggested something so devastating that it had wiped out trillions of beings without leaving so much as ruins behind. The choice is yours. Admiral, Arya said softly, but choose quickly. My patience with your species has reached its end. On Earth, Dr. Mina Kim watched the drama unfold from her monitoring station in Tokyo. As the Zephyrian fleet began its hasty retreat, their ships limping away with whatever dignity they could salvage, she activated her communication link to Harisa. Arya, she said hesitantly, may I ask you something? Of course, Dr. Kim. Why did you wait so long to intervene? You could have stopped the Zephyrian Empire centuries ago. Why let so many innocent species suffer? There was a long pause before Arya answered, and when it did, its voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there during its confrontation with the Admiral. Because I needed to observe humanity's character, Arya replied. When I awakened 12 years ago and began studying your species, I needed to understand what kind of people you truly were. Would you choose conquest or protection? Would you seek to dominate or to help? Dr. Mina Kim thought about all the conversations they'd had with Arya over the years, all the questions they'd asked about how to better protect other species, how to help those in need, how to use their knowledge for the good of all life. When your first instinct upon learning about the wider galaxy was to ask how you could protect others rather than how you could destroy your enemies, Arya continued, you proved yourselves worthy of inheriting my guardianship. The first builders always intended for their children to eventually take over the protection of life in the galaxy. You have shown that humanity is ready for that responsibility. The implications were staggering. Earth hadn't just been defended, it had been chosen. Humanity had passed a test they didn't even know they were taking, and now they were being entrusted with the protection of all life in the galaxy. Welcome to your new role, Arya said, and Dr. Mina Kim could swear she heard a smile in its voice. Guardians of the Galaxy, you're going to do just fine.